I'll go back to really the beginning. We didn't know where the stadium would be. We had, I think, about 29 possible sites, and they were from throughout, from Baltimore to DC, in that in-between area.
The council people from the 2nd and 3rd district that would be more in favor of keeping Memorial Stadium in their districts, they would talk about it in different council lunches and mayor's luncheons. But I think when they found out it was going to cost like $54 million just to renovate Memorial Stadium, they realized, you know, we got to move ahead. We got to get a new stadium, because that's what the state of the art called for.
At the time of the birth of the Camden Yards project back in 1986, 85, the whole concept of putting a stadium in an urban setting was just unheard of. By that point, through the 60s and the 70s and the early part of the 80s, stadiums were all built in suburban communities. There was some belief that they were easier to reach, more attuned to the growth of suburban America. Highways were a little cheaper to run there. Parking was a little easier to get. There was less expense involved in running infrastructure. All those things led to this enormous growth of suburban stadiums. The Mannequin Commission was the first futile but first attempt at trying to organize thoughts as to could there be a new stadium for the Orioles and perhaps to engage the NFL or not. And if so, where would it be located? How would it be funded? What would the parameters of it be? And so the Mannequin Commission went about studying where there was land between here and Washington. Schaefer hated that commission, largely because there were no Baltimoreans on it. And he wasn't about to let anybody make a determination that there was going to be a new stadium for the Baltimore Orioles that he didn't have a part or a hand in. So he tried to kill the Mannequin Commission. So all this is happening while the election cycle is running. So Schaefer had appointed as the counterpoint to the Mannequin Commission, which was appointed by Governor Hughes. Schaefer appointed the Buddha Commission, led by a guy named Hank Buddha, who was the then CEO of Bell Atlantic, which is now Verizon. Hank Buddha was given clear marching orders from Schaefer. Find me a location in the city and tell me how you think it could get done. You're a businessman, tell me how you think it could get done. Buddha came back with Plan A, which was renovate Memorial Stadium. And Plan B was 3 locations in the city, one of which was Camden Yards. The Mannequin Commission came back with Laurel, Falston, and Edgewater, none of which worked for Schaefer.
They looked at where do we put the stadiums, and they came down to two locations. Camden Yards, right up at the Beltway in 95, where the Beltway in 95 is, that they wanted to put it where it had access to people. The 95 location had better access than Camden Yards, but Camden Yards was in Baltimore City, and Governor Schaefer wanted it in Baltimore City. And a lot of us came to the conclusion that Baltimore City was the best place to have it.
Schaefer comes into my office with a gentleman by the name of Herb Belgrad. So they walk into my office in whatever day in November that was, and sit down and they say, listen, we're going to be releasing the Buddha Commission report. This is Herb speaking. And we're going to be making a recommendation. We think we know where the stadium will go. We want to take the furthest point south in the city we can go without actually crossing into Anne Arundel County, because we want to get as close as we can to DC, put us on a highway so that Ed Williams' DC friends can easily get to the ballpark, and I also have no reason to think about ever moving the team. It's going to go in the furthest point south. I said, what's the furthest point south? He said, the Camden Yards area. I had never even seen the Camden Yards area. At that time, there wasn't the flyover ramp from I-95 that connects you now to the ballpark. I'll get to that in a minute. Nobody would go down to that district. It had the old incinerator, which they still have down there, where they, burn people's trash. It was a rat-infested area of old warehouses because they'd come off the docks.
I was with Williams when the governor called and said, we got to decide on this site. Williams said, I've been thinking about what we've been doing for the last few years, and trying to build a ballpark halfway between Baltimore and Washington was like trying to build a home halfway between your wife and your girlfriend. You got to make a commitment, and we'll make a commitment to Baltimore. And this is in the right part of Baltimore. It was down in the lower quadrant and close to Washington. Instead of having to navigate your way through Baltimore to the far corner, it was closer to Washington, and in some ways, it was more convenient for Washingtonians. In many ways, it was. And so I remember him saying that. I was struck by the phrasing, and we all were. And the decision was made to do Camden Yards. And it did fit with our notion of an urban ballpark. We just didn't think, at least I didn't think, that a ballpark for baseball should be in the suburbs. It should be in the city. Baseball is the quintessential urban game, and it should be in the city. And that's when we decided, or when Williams decided, that the team should be built, the ballpark should be built at Camden Yards.
That was all Schaefer. If he hadn't been so passionate about the city, it could very easily be on the Beltway at 95 right now, and it wouldn't be as iconic. You wouldn't have the warehouse in the background. You wouldn't have everything that goes with a city.